Before I get started with this retrospective, there's some business to take care of. I want to give my condolences to several people who are fundamental to this franchise. May they rest in peace. Kazuki Takahashi, the writer and mangaka, even as he stepped away from the original series, he continued to provide support to the anime team as they made the sequels to his manga. And enough cannot be said for his impact on this series that played such a big part of all our childhoods. I'm eternally grateful to him for creating the franchise that's meant so much to me. Next is Madeline Blaustein, the voice of Yugi's grandpa and a larger behind-the-scene role in helping get these series over here, and to become what they became. And finally, James Carter Cathcart, voice of Weevil Underwood, and more famously as Meowth and Gyarados in Pokemon, a very versatile voice actor in the industry, able to melt into any role given to him. Rest in peace to them. I hope they all know what impact they had on us. They all deserve the fame and praise for their part in making this show what it was. Same with all the other voice actors and people behind the show. The staff of 4Kids, the staff of the original Japanese version. Their voice talent cannot be understated. It's crazy to think that as for huge as this franchise is, same with Pokemon, I think they deserve all the fame in the world. But I guess that's the caveat of voice acting. Nobody but the most dedicated of fans know the names behind these characters. 4Kids staff for the most part stayed with 4Kids, or Pokemon. Some branched out into other anime, but I wish more of them could be like A-list celebrities. But hey, high praise to all of them, and I hope someday I can become a voice actor like them. Anyway, rest in peace to those no longer with us, and a big thank you to everyone involved in getting the franchise to kids like me. Thank you for listening to this. Tune into the retrospective, and I hope you enjoy. Picture this. It's Saturday morning. You're out of school. You get your bowl of Fruity Pebbles, and you're off to the TV to watch the Fox Box. Or Kids WB. Or heck, Toon's Eye if you're older. Many names, same lineup. Hello everybody, and welcome to the Yugioh Complete Series Retrospective. My name is Stephen Blocker, a lifelong super fan of the original Duel Monsters series. We're going to go arc by arc. We're going to recap the story, give some honest critiques and opinions, and just relive my nostalgia. And I'm living it with all of you. And here's where it all began. The start of a legacy, where we all learned how to play the game the wrong way. Dungeons and Dragons, but with the cards as props, where the duels themselves were all about the spectacle rather than the technical performance. But you know what? It worked. And guess what? It got all of us hooked. I know I picked up my first card pack from watching the series. It's probably like how so many people got into skateboarding because of the Tony Hawk series. Yep, all it took was a fun game to get people interested in something dangerous. But at least with skateboarding, the worst thing you have to worry about is falling and breaking a leg. With Yu-Gi-Oh, if you play that game wrong, you get sent to the Shadow Realm. I remember just being in awe when I saw the series for the first time. And now, I have a platform to share my passion with all of you. Yu-Gi-Oh was pretty much my opening to anime. It and Pokemon was. In terms of watching regularly at least, I had seen other anime before. For example, I remember seeing Ghost in the Shell, and I remember it gave me nightmares, so I didn't watch it again. And then I remember seeing this weird show about a boy with wolf ears, and I found out that was Inuyasha. Now granted, I didn't really get super into Inuyasha either. Yu-Gi-Oh is the first anime I was ever super really deep into. I mean, what makes Yu-Gi-Oh special? I think the fact you can actually play the cards you see in the game. You know, you can't shoot a Kamehameha in real life, or run up a tree like Naruto, but you can play the cards, just like Yugi plays. Really, the only thing missing is the holograms. Come on, technology companies, get on that! Really, Yu-Gi-Oh genuinely represents my childhood, and it's what I think of first when I hear the word anime. It was a staple for all of us early 2000s kids. I grew up watching it when I spent too many hours of the day watching Cartoon Network. My fondest memories are staying up late to watch it, waking up early on Saturday morning to watch it, collecting cards from the department store when they first came out. It even gave me my interest in art and monster designs. It was a foundational part of my childhood. I would spend hours looking at the cards, reading the vanilla monster text, and making up my own stories with the lore. It even represents my video game habits, as many of my favorite video games are Yu-Gi-Oh games. Heck, the only RPGs I've ever played are Yu-Gi-Oh games. So now, this retrospective is 100% about the show. I will not really be commenting on the card game much. My knowledge on the metagame is actually really poor, so I'll only be focusing on the card game from an anime perspective. So, keep that in mind, please. Now granted, Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters was not the first Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime, but for most of us it was the first we saw because the original series never left Japan. Heck, most of us probably didn't even know what anime was at the time. In fact, it was also the only fad I ever got into when I was a kid. Yeah, I was a young hipster. Not intentionally, mind you, but I kind of just did my own thing. I'm actually such a huge fan of the series, I have the Eye of Yugioh tattooed on my arm. So, yeah. If that don't scream dedication or obsession, I don't know what does. You're going to hear me gush all over this show. It's so easy because I genuinely love it. It's one of my biggest obsessions when I was a kid, and as an adult too. But how would you feel if I told you I never played the trading card game? Never. Not once. I collected the cards, I played the video games, but when it comes to actually sitting down and playing the card game, I never did it.
Where else to start but from the beginning? Sure, it's not the very beginning, but this is the first arc most of us have seen. However, I will be covering Season 0 more towards the end of this series. The Gallop anime goes first, since it's the one most of us are familiar with. Also, since I've seen both sub and dub, this will be from the perspective of someone who's seen and enjoys both. Now, just to set some ground rules, I've decided to call characters by their dub name. That way this retrospective will be open for as many people as possible, because even people who like the sub better probably recognize the dub character names more than the sub character names. You know, like, if I say the dub characters' names, everyone's going to know what I'm talking about. If I say the sub characters' names, chances are some people might get confused. This retrospective is for fans of either, and nobody is excluded, but due to familiarity, the dub scripts' names will be what I refer to them as.
I feel like very few people have actually ever sat down and watched the Japanese sub version, and I feel like they only know about it through forums and videos dedicated to showing the differences. But really, the sub and dub version are completely different shows. In fact, I'd say the story itself is about 60% different. I highly recommend it because it is so different. It's not just the same show, but with more violence. From character traits to story beats.
As for the backstory, I think y'all know it. Kazuki Takahashi, rest in peace, he passed away in 2022, made the Yu-Gi-Oh manga to center around a protagonist who fought with games rather than his fists, like other heroes in the same genre. The series started off pretty dark and horrific, focusing on various different games, and even included little bumpers showing off ideas for games you could play at home, using things like playing cards. One of the games featured had dueling cards, and was heavily inspired by Magic the Gathering. The game itself became such a huge hit in the series, people wanted to buy them in real life, so it became a real card game. An anime was made by Toei Animation, but never left Japan and never really took off. Then as the card game itself picked up steam, another studio, Studio Gallop, made an anime deciding to ignore the first series for the most part and jump straight to the card game arcs. And said anime was picked up by 4Kids Entertainment, where it became the hit it is today. Beloved by all, helping kickstart the early 2000s anime boom. Heck, most of us probably didn't even know what anime was. And then, the rest is history. While Pokemon ended up becoming the cultural juggernaut of the two, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is always my preferred one. I love Pokemon and value them both into my childhood, but Yu-Gi-Oh! Hits different. I can still watch Yu-Gi-Oh! But Pokemon just doesn't really hold my interest all that much anymore, unfortunately. Yu-Gi-Oh! Was also the beginning of the end of the 80s and 90s anime cliches. It was one of the last anime with anime hair, and one of the last long-running filler-heavy anime. Series after this point started to have more defined set numbers of episodes. Now, it wasn't the total last one, Naruto also did this, but Yu-Gi-Oh! Was definitely the beginning of the end for this type of anime. By this point in anime, we'd see it like we do now, with 13 to 26 episode series, and not series that continue indefinitely while running along manga, as was common in the 80s and 90s. So Yu-Gi-Oh! Is one of the last of its kind. Funnily enough, I never actually played the trading card game. I collected the cards mostly for the art. It's easily the best artwork of any trading card game. And there's something for everybody. I played the video games more than I ever played the card game. I was never any good at it anyway, so... Well, what's the first thing you see when you watch an anime? The opening credits, right? So let's talk about the opening to Duelist Kingdom. I hate to say it, but the opening is actually a little bland, though it does include several subtle explanations, so anyone not familiar can get a basic grasp of the story. But it also has Yugi with Curse of Dragon fighting a Blue Eyes, which 1, never happens, and 2, Curse of Dragon isn't even that important to the plot, it's just a monster in Yugi's deck. And then the rest of it is standard shonen fare with pictures of the main cast, the main villain looking menacing, and that's it. The song itself is kinda mediocre. It didn't really get me pumped up, and the lyrics don't really mean anything to the show. It talks about magazines and game cartridges not being played, and if that makes them useless, and about not being able to reach or understand people around you. Nothing about cards or friendship. Maybe it represents the pharaoh, but still. Also, seeing the clips here that didn't make the cut for the dub was actually really exciting. It's like finding out a movie you adore had deleted scenes that you didn't know about. The dub opening is that super iconic instrumental we've all heard a million times and is drilled into our heads. It's fast-paced with various action shots from the show, rather than just from the opening sequence of the Japanese version. It works even if it's just mostly random epic moments. I won't complain. The Japanese ending, however, is amazing. The lyrics are about meeting up and hanging out with friends, as if once the episode's over, the group all goes to chill together at the mall or something, and the tone is just really melancholic. I love it. It's a lot like the original Dragon Ball's ending song, just a good, calm song to say goodbye for the day, telling you to go be with your friends and loved ones now, because the show's over. Come back tomorrow. This tone is also reflected in the images shown. It's all about them bonding together at the beach, snowboarding, and just hanging out. And the lyrics are a perfect fit for a show all about friendship. And these endings are very special to me since none of the footage was ever used in the dub whatsoever. Because the credits in the dub version are just the opening spliced with credits on the side. That's it. I assume it's because most networks that these shows would air on either cut the credits during a broadcast or play them silently when the next show starts. Seriously, think about it. If you ever watch a show on Kids WB or even Nickelodeon, how often do you remember seeing the credits? The characters. Our protagonists include Yugi Muto, a shy and short, socially awkward boy who loves to play games. In his life is Atem, who is kind of a mystery right now as he's a super confident alter ego of Yugi, who we'll get to know more about later. He's the assertive, confident side us introverts dream of having as he comes out whenever Yugi is scared and gets him the wins. Forget dueling, I want this guy to help me with my dating life. He also has his grandfather, who ends up becoming a MacGuffin. Grandpa runs a game shop and serves as sort of the wise sensei type for the group, but also ends up taking more of a damsel in distress role. He's a game master and a total pervert, Gee, where have I seen that before? Yugi owns the Millennium Puzzle, one of 7 Millennium items that will all, or most at least, will all play a big part in this show. His best friend is Joey Wheeler, a brash knucklehead who's depicted as a total idiot in the dub, which isn't true. He's kind of just a hothead, but he's also a very caring person. His morality pet is his sister, Serenity Wheeler, who's going blind, so he has to rescue her by paying for her operation. Also, quick side note, Yugioh means friendship, and the first syllable of Yugi and Joey's names are Yu and Joe. So that's a fun little Easter egg. Like finding out Shoryu Ken has both Ryu and Ken's name. Tristan and Taya, who lost all their personality in translation. Tristan is basically the dumb muscle he's always there, but he never does anything worthwhile, while Taya is relegated to friendship speeches in the dub. In the sub, however, she's actually the snarky, sarcastic one. And, here's a fun fact, in the Japanese sub version, in the next episode previews, they're narrated by Taya. Now as for characters, Yugi is mostly the same between sub and dub. Joey, however, went from enthusiastic and hot-headed, being a little bit of a blockhead, to basically barely being above Beavis and Butthead in terms of intelligence. In the dub, since Tristan had no personality to speak of, there was nothing to strip away, and Taya was obviously the more snarky, sarcastic one, rather than the ask dumb questions and make friendship speeches. Seto Kaiba. Kaiba's hard to place as he's a villain sometimes, and also more of a Vegeta or Sasuke level rival at others. And sometimes he even acts as a protagonist, in later arcs at least. I'll put him in the protagonist here since he's not evil enough to be a villain, but he's also not irrelevant enough to be a rival. He's a rich orphan who's very smart and believes in relying on hard work and talent rather than magic. He knows it exists, in the sub version at least, but prefers to succeed on his own accord. He has a brother named Mokuba, who, as a running theme, always gets kidnapped.
Can someone put a frickin' bell on him or something?
Villains. Our main antagonist this arc is Pegasus. We know very little about him right now, other than the fact he's the inventor of the card game and runs the company that actually makes Duel Monster cards. He's very eccentric and is basically a man-child, which is awesome. I like him a lot. There's not many true villains in this arc. Like, there's non-duelist villains, like several bodyguards and henchmen, most notably Chemo, who physically overpowers the group and Kaiba more than once. Croquet, who's kind of just a butler. He doesn't really do anything nefarious at all. And then there's the Big Five, who lack names and unique designs at this point in the story. They do become more important later on, but right now they're just faceless suits who want to give Kaiba Corp to Pegasus. For henchmen, we have Panic, a sadistic brute who likes to play mind games, Para and Dox. They're basically the Ginyu Force of this arc, ultra goofy and silly, but they're big threats under that. And then this overweight clown shapeshifter guy. He's somehow able to mimic people changing his weight. That's some real decoy octopus stuff there. And then the rivals. The less evil and more so just antagonistic characters in the series. Weevil, a sneaky little bug, Rex Raptor, dinosaur extraordinaire, Mako, who's actually one of the more sympathetic characters this season, Bones, a ghoulish looking boy who's probably typecast and honestly just might have a medical condition that makes him look that way. And then finally, My Valentine. I can't see me loving nobody but you. Yeah, like I said before, My Valentine is actually my favorite character. And also, my first anime crush.
Shut up, I thought she was hot. Sue me.
Seriously though, Maya's such a good character to me. I think she's actually a very in-depth character with lots of appeal. She's sassy and strong-willed, but she has a soft side. Like a pudding-filled cactus. There's a reference nobody's gonna get. Also, my first Anime crush. And animated crush. 80s and 90s kids had Jessica Rabbit. Not me. Maya's also a really weird character. I always felt like she blurred the line between main and minor character. At times, it really felt like she could have been and was supposed to be a main character. Like sometimes, she's genuinely a part of the main cast. Like select moments where she's shown as part of Yuki's friend group. And she's played quite beautifully by Megan Hollingshead. A perfect fit for the role. Definitely helps make Maya more memorable and not just another buxom blonde anime girl. Also, look at all this crazy hair. Yugi's spikes that look like a maple leaf. Weeble's beetle bowl cut that's blue. Maya having M-shaped bangs. The changes. You can't talk about 4Kids without bringing up the changes they made to their dubs. Now, this is not a critique at all. I actually really like the 4Kids dub, and I feel too many people are really harsh with it. It's cheesy and fun in a Saturday morning cartoon way, and it has a great cast. I really love most of the actors in the dub, and wish they would have found more success and obtained more recognition. Such is the plight of voice actors. Nobody ever gives them credit or recognition. We'll just be noting the more unique changes, like the name changes. So Kaiba and Yugi are completely unchanged. Yugi I can buy because, well, the show's called Yugioh. I mean, it's the name of the show. Jinochi was changed to Joey, so they both have Joe in their name. Anzu and Honda became Taya and Tristan. I assume only because they have the same amount of syllables. Though those changes seem more arbitrary and random. However, according to some sources, Tristan and Taya were originally going to be called Sam and Sally. However, Kids WB wanted something more exotic and unique. But like, Mai is still Mai. But they changed her name from Kajaku, which means peacock, and fits her harpies, to Valentine. A bit more generic, but fitting for a more attractive, flirtatious character. I wonder if they changed it because of Faye Valentine. I mean, they do have similar personalities, and even face designs. Mecha Tsunami was originally Ryota Kajiki. Ryota Kajiki sounds like a fairly normal sounding Japanese name. Mecha Tsunami feels more like something a professional wrestler would use. Same with Rex Raptor and Weevil Underwood. In the sub, they're just called Dinosaur Ryazaki and Insector Haga. They just have Dinosaur and Insector added to their names. But again, like how in wrestling you have nicknames like Hitman, The Game, or Stone Cold in quotation marks next to the character's real name. Pegasus is also a very hotly debated name. In the sub, he's known as Pegasus Crawford, with Pegasus being his first name. Dub, it's his surname. Given that I just cannot see a parent naming their child Pegasus, plus his island's whole motif seems to be branded around Pegasus, the mythological creature. And most companies that include the CEO's name as the company name often do it with the last name rather than the first. Like, can you imagine if Disney Productions was named Walt Productions? Or if instead of Hitchcock Studios, it was Alfred Studios? See, it's really weird because half the cast still has Japanese sounding names, and the other half has English names that sound like wrestling names. It's a matter of preference, but still, I think I like the dub more. I also want to comment on the other cosmetic changes the dub added, like the editing out of all text. I like the look of the cards in the dub, how it's just a big picture with stats, but seeing all the buildings have their signs airbrushed out is weird. Not so much in Duelist Kingdom, since the only text is a letter, and some other small things, but once we get to Battle City, where the location is a big city with various storefronts, it's a lot weirder. But when it comes to the changes, it's the biggest critique that people give 4Kids. So let's talk about it. I think calling 4Kids Productions dubs isn't accurate, as a dub is mostly just a translation. It's more apt to consider what 4Kids did a remake. An original production just using the same animation of the series, edited to tell a different story. Objectively, I don't even consider them the same show due to all the big differences. So really, it's all about perspective. So I do get why people hate these dubs so much, but again, these adaptations were always more about capturing kids or people not into anime, with the anime as a blueprint. So while I do feel for fans who feel like they got robbed of a true proper dub, I can't hate them because of how they got me into the medium I love so much. But really, it was also a different time. Nowadays, this type of thing is completely 100% unacceptable. But that's mostly because the culture of anime has changed. The more traditional dubbing style was considered very obscure and only for hardcore fans. The 4Kids method was actually mainstream. They just didn't treat the series as anime. For example, back in the day, you had companies like Genion and ADV doing their own releases of anime, but those were still very obscure. 4Kids method was standard at the time. The original Dragon Ball had a lot of dialogue changes, for example, or the very kidified Harmony Gold dub that came out in the 80s. Much earlier than 4Kids ever existed, along with series 4Kids never even touched, like Digimon, that aired around the same time. And then way back in the day, you had series like Space Battleship Yamato, and Robotech, and Macross, that also got it really bad. Heck, even before 4Kids, look at how many Japanese video games were neutered before being released here. I mean, obviously since then, anime itself has grown vastly in popularity, and people care more about original products rather than just it being a show to watch.
Now obviously, once anime started getting more popular in the United States, and it wasn't just the thing you had to find through tape trading, conventions, or through more obscure media companies like Genion and Media Blasters, obviously people wanted the more accurate product. We see this with a lot of franchises. If you're older, your first introduction to Dragon Ball was this. This is Dragon Power for the NES. They brought the game over here and stripped it of its original anime license, making more of a generic kung fu movie type of game. If you were a kid in the United States in the 80s and 90s, obviously you had no idea what Dragon Ball was. And obviously, once Toonami and Dragon Ball caught on, they could sell original Dragon Ball products without having to Americanize them like this. But then, once Dragon Ball itself obviously caught on, you could sell the original product here. You didn't need to Americanize it to make it more palatable for the audience. It's something you can get away with when it's an IP that most people aren't really all that interested in. But when it's something that's popular, obviously you don't have to do it anymore. Especially if you're in the target audience for 4Kids entertainment, which was kids who probably didn't even know what anime was at the time. In fact, I think most kids probably just wanted to see monsters fighting.
I might do a separate video on this, but still, I think there was a lot of good to their work. But with them out of the dubbing game, you also lost access to things like school stationery and backpacks and various other things kids need featuring anime licenses. So I feel like that was something that was lost. So while I know I'm making excuses for a company that probably doesn't deserve it, the truth is, I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for them. I'd probably be doing... I don't even know. That's a scary thought, isn't it? The biggest example of this tone difference is the music and overall sound. The Japanese version had a lot of silent moments, where it's just the characters looking around and reacting to things, or internal monologues, much like Death Note, while the dub has almost no silence. During those said reaction shots, it's often the other character talking who's not shown. The soundtrack also follows more of a Hollywood orchestral score, while the sub goes more like video game music. There's hints of jazz, and the darker scenes play a lot more ominously with the music. The dub pretty much does the same kind of music for everything, while the sub has more variety. The sub also tends to have more complicated philosophical talks. You know, with all the monologues and the spirit that nobody else can see, Did Death Note get any inspiration from Yu-Gi-Oh? That's something to think about. Anyway, back to the point. The dub focuses more on boasting and insults, rather than the more inner monologue and philosophy talks. Another thing to keep in mind is that Yu-Gi-Oh! In Japan uses a lot of religious iconography, like pentagrams, and they actually talk about actual demon summoning, like rituals. But by my understanding, things like pentagrams are not really viewed as religious in Japan, since Christianity is such a small minority in Japan. Though in the US, it's obviously a pretty big deal. Not saying it was done with malice, those symbols don't really mean the same thing to us as they do to other countries. Yu-Gi-Oh! Had to comply with kid show standards, network kid show standards at that, and most kid shows in the US don't really talk about God at all. Heck, you can't even say the word God in a lot of kid shows. Even in the context of the phrase, oh my god, you can't say it. So I don't blame 4Kids really, since they had to comply with strict standards. Now let's talk about the voice cast. Everyone I feel plays their parts exceptionally well, and I will always praise them. Even to this day, with all 4Kids' faults, I really don't think they ever had a bad voice fit. Maybe one or two, but still. In fact, they actually pulled a lot of these people from the drama and theater scene, so that might explain why they were so good at this. Dan Green, who plays Yugi, manages to get both the soft, gentle nature of young Yugi and the tough and serious nature of the Tem. Eric Stewart as Kaiba was great, Wayne Grayson as Joey, Megan Hollingshead absolutely nailed it as My Valentine, giving her the perfect flirtatious and mature character she was supposed to have. And most of all, Darren Dunstan as Pegasus really knocked it out of the park and actually feels like a one-to-one copy of his Japanese sub counterpart. The only real difference is that in the sub, Pegasus, being American, spouts off a lot of random English words, which isn't really recreated, but I mean, dubs always struggle with that stuff anyway. Even more traditional dubs like Azumanga Daioh and Strawberry Marshmallow, even minor roles like James Carter Cathcart as Weevil. He gives them the most perfect dirty cheat voice ever. I really appreciate all their work, even the ones I didn't mention here. The plot. This series revolves around Duel Monsters, a hit new card game sweeping the nation. In the series, it's as popular as most sports. There's no NFL or NBA here, it's all about card games. Yugi plays for love of the game and never really competes in tournaments. His grandfather owns a very rare and valuable card called the Blue Eyes White Dragon, one of only 4 in the entire world. So even back then, Konami was doing short print runs. Kaiba is a collector of these cards and pretty much the undisputed champion and top dog of Duel Monsters. He wants that Blue Eyes for a complete set. So basically eBay scalping before eBay scalping. Grandpa refuses to sell it for sentimental reasons we'll learn about later. So Kaiba challenges him to a duel that somehow causes the man to have a heart attack. Now this makes more sense in the manga, as at most, now in the manga, this actually makes more sense, as in the manga, this actually makes a lot more sense, because in the story, people mostly play with paper mats, like in boring real-life duels. And the holograms, at most at this point, are about as big as action figures. So imagine if you took someone who'd only seen Pong and showed them like PlayStation 5 virtual reality level graphics. So Kaiba wins, taking Grandpa's Blue Eyes, and then he rips it in half, meaning now there's only 3 Blue Eyes White Dragons in the entire world. Maybe that's why the card limit is 3. And as I said earlier, Grandpa was voiced by Madeline Blaustein, who also played Meowth at points, and several other iconic 4Kids roles. Yugi duels Kaiba for Grandpa's honor, in a duel that, while fairly standard, has one of the most epic endings to a duel, and a great way to end the first episode. Exodia! Obliterate! So in the first episode we learn about monster attack stats, some card effects to show powers and everything, and an alternate win condition. So yeah, definitely a great start. Kaiba's undefeated streak is now over, sending him into a downward spiral. Funny story, in the early episodes, Kaiba sounds a lot more evil, a little bit raspier. So this could be a deliberate attempt to match Kaiba losing the evil in his heart. Or it could be the voice actor Eric Stewart changing the input on his own accord. Early episodes of animation, the actual way the characters speak is often a little bit different, so it could go either way with this one. And I'm just going to say it, Eric Stewart is overwhelmingly good as Kaiba. I can't see anyone else playing him, he's perfect. Joey Wheeler, Yugi's best buddy, takes up the game with the strict discipline of Yugi's grandpa. He's worse than a darn drill instructor. Though I guess in this show, going to play a card game is much more dangerous than going to war. But also, his deck is just terrible. It's all monsters. Hey, just like we used to play, remember? Remember getting card packs full of useless junk? Yeah, Joey pretty much embodies that. Joey's main reason for dueling is to help his sister who's going blind, so he can pay for her to have an operation. Doesn't Japan have universal health care? Why does Joey need to pay for it? Figure that out. One minor plot point that was cut from the dub, Joey actually learned how to play to get into a tournament nearby, the National Championship. In the Japanese subversion, he did very poorly, and this is mocked throughout the series. In the dub, Joey has no real reason to learn dueling like this. Grandpa even calls out his greed for entering the tournament for money. And also, randomly, this poster changes. It originally included Celtic Guardian and Hercules Beetle, but they changed it to Harpy's Pet Dragon and Blackluster Soldier? Accidental foreshadowing? That's the thing, the writers seem to push that people who do things for noble reasons deserve the win more than people who just do it for fun or for the money. Like, if you go on Jeopardy, you deserve to lose if you're not doing it for a tragic backstory reason. But Joey's story also mirrors our journey. We started off being terrible at this game, just playing random high attack monsters. Because let's face it, all of us were terrible at deck building. Yugi is then contacted by Pegasus, who sends him a VHS tape, a mysterious glove, and some star-shaped coins. He lore dumps on us that there's more to this than meets the eye. Yep, they're not just useless pieces of cardboard, they have soul and heart. There's connections to Egypt with these cards and spirits of the past. As the opening said, they played a game of great and terrible power, and then it was turned into a product for children. Just like this show itself. I like that they chose Egyptian mythology, since a lot of anime with lore like this tends to follow more Eastern theology. Plus, Egyptian culture is just one of those things that's fascinating to a bunch of people. And it's one of the most iconic cultures in the world. I mean, think about it. Pyramids, hieroglyphics, mummies, sphinxes. Kazuki Takahashi himself seemed to know a lot about it. Whether he did research just for the manga, or if it was something that he was genuinely interested in prior, and based the series on his passion for it. After all, the saying goes, write what you know, so I do suspect that Kazuki Takahashi must have had some sort of interest in Egypt before writing the series. And then Pegasus challenges him to a duel, through the TV. A time duel, which Yugi nearly wins, but due to technicalities and a clause in the contract that neither of them can lose right now, the writers force a Dusty Rhodes finish, and Pegasus takes Grandpa's soul. Okay, Pegasus clearly forced that with all his talking. This is why in chess, the players have separate clocks. To get it back, Yugi must compete in a tournament on a faraway island, Duelist Kingdom. Joey wants to tag along, and the group sneak onto the boat, where we meet several characters who will be important in this arc. Rex, a brash dinosaur duelist, Weevil, a sneaky little worm who seems friendly and befriends the group, and then the statuesque beauty herself, my Valentine, my anime waifu crush.
Please, crush me.
Back off, I saw it first.
Mai shows off her psychic routine to Rex Raptor. Joey finally builds a proper strategy by trading for some decent cards that will all be super relevant later. Seriously, every duel he plays, he wins with at least one of these cards. Yugi even gives him a time wizard. an in-series very rare and powerful card. Weevil Underwood, of course, shows his true colors later. He gives Exodia a nice bath, almost causing Joey to drown trying to rescue them. You know, for a minor character, Weevil sure does have a big impact. I mean, he basically got rid of Exodia. And from this point, the only people who will ever use it are villains. Yugi actually never uses it again. Considering how iconic Exodia is, that's probably surprising to a lot of people. And you know, Weevil's design actually fits him really well. The bughorn glasses, the Beetle's bowl cut, and even his size. He's short and he's very sneaky, like a bug. And then after 3 episodes, the tournament finally starts. We're introduced to all our principal players like Mako, Weevil, and Rex. Fun fact, none of these people ever make it to the finals. They're just building up Yugi and Joey's opponents. Those 3, Weevil, Rex, and Mako, are the final 3 of the national championship Joey entered. And then you've got My Valentine, but nobody ever explains why Mai is so high. She's considered a highly ranked player, but we never actually learn what tournaments or anything she's won. We've also gotten several establishing moments with these 3 characters. Weevil is a dirty cheater, Rex is gullible, but Mako doesn't get any screen time until they go through all the big names participating. Later on, we see her and Weevil ranked evenly. Now, we do see Weevil winning the national championship earlier on, but it's never stated what Mai won to get such a high ranking. Also, look how tall she is. She towers over everybody here. The tournament begins, and the rules are set. 10 star chips to reach the final. Simple enough. Everyone starts with 2. It's like gambling, but for kids. Now let's talk about Yugi and Joey's decks here. I'll also be covering the other decks as we go along. I didn't cover Kaiba or Pegasus yet, because for the most part, their decks early on differ greatly from what comes later this arc. Yugi is a trap master. His deck is full of situational magic and trap cards, kind of like a multi-tool. Joey is more like a hammer. His deck feels more like a starter deck you get in a Duelist of the Roses game, and have to make do with until you get something better. Like, his deck, aesthetically, is almost all swordsmen. Really generic ones, too. Like characters from a Dynasty Warrior game. The most unique one I'd say is Battle Warrior, who has some kind of luchador wrestler look. Aside from that, it's also a lot of anthropomorphic animals, but with swords. Things like Tiger Axe. And overall, a lot of Joey's victories tend to come with cards he obtains. You know, things he wins from trades, or takes from opponents. Joey's other skill is taking other people's cards and using them against them, with cards like Copycat and Grave Robber. He's like an RPG character where when you beat a boss, you gain their powers and abilities. And then Yugi's deck. Yugi plays a lot of situational spell and trap cards, so there is some plot convenience in getting exactly what he'll need. But this is a shonen anime, and that's par for the course here. His ace monster is the iconic Dark Magician. But his deck isn't very well fleshed out, and it doesn't even have that much synergy. His monster cards are all pretty mediocre. It's really just a bunch of vanilla monsters in the 12 to 1400 attack range, which is the average for this era. His most versatile has to be Kuribo. While it's his weakest, it also has a lot of random abilities that save Yugi. His deck includes pretty much every type of monsters, the majority of which are spellcasters, fiends, fairies, even includes one dinosaur, and a zombie. There's not much of a visual theme either. Some of them look really cute like Kuribo and Beaver Warrior, but others look like something right out of a horror show, like Horned Imp and Summoned Skull. But there's also a ton of variety, which makes sense given that he's the main character. We'll be seeing him duel the most. Most of the monsters don't really seem to do all that much, and often just get destroyed. Celtic Guardian is probably Yugi's most used fodder, as he shows up a lot, but is destroyed very fast. There's a couple monsters that only show up once, like Griffor and Blackland Fire Dragon, and not really any card that supersede the others, all except Dark Magician and Summoned Skull. But his monsters mostly give way to traps, of which there's a lot. Things like Spellbinding Circle, and Mirror Force for protection, Mock You the Magical Mist, which basically does whatever a real rainstorm would do in the situation. and even super situational cards like Monster Recovery, and some equips like Horn of the Unicorn. Basically a little bit of everything. Joey has arguably the worst deck in the series. He plays nothing but warriors with no effects, and almost no spell cards. He uses fusion once, and that's it. His most successful combo is Baby Dragon and Time Wizard. If Yugi and Joey were RPG characters, Joey would be like having to grind, and Yugi would be more like starting with pretty much everything you'd need. Neither of their decks are refined here. Then Kaiba's deck is actually kind of weird. He plays Blue Eyes, which is the strongest card in the game, and one of the mascots of the franchise. But his deck isn't refined here either. He usually just plays debilitating spell cards and high attack monsters, all of which are much meaner looking than Yugi's monsters. But he also plays Crush Card Virus, which definitely debilitates a deck, and some similar cards. A very archaic precursor to the floodgates we see today. So let's rapid fire. Yugi calls out Weevil, who takes advantage of the early rules, but aside from that, he doesn't really cheat. And really, that knowledge is only so helpful since people will learn the rules anyway. The main new rule is field power bonuses. Think of it like a terrain boost in an RPG. Basically, it gives a 30% boost to any monster that's compatible with the field. But there's also no negative fields, so you can't lose attack points from putting monsters in an unfavorable field. Like for example, if you put a fire type in the water area, you won't actually get a penalty. This is also something that was never implemented whatsoever into the game. The closest really is probably you have cards like Forest and Yami, which are field spells, but they only give a flat 200 attack and not 30%. Duels to the Roses is probably the closest, but that's only a 500 attack boost, and that game is a lot more different than the regular Yu-Gi-Oh game, as there's terrain, and you have to actually move your cards around a board. Also, it is never actually explained properly how the field power bonuses work, in the dub at least. It goes up by 30% rather than a flat rate. But that 30% is never mentioned. They never really try to explain what fields there are and what monsters get a boost from those fields until we're on that said field. They never show all the fields and just tend to spring them on us. We also very rarely ever go back to an old field. There is this brief shot of all the various fields in the Weevil duel, but it's really hard to decipher what they are because they all look so similar. It's never fully explained and seems random. Some make sense, like water, but warriors getting a boost from meadow and insects in forest feels odd. It's like an RPG. I also feel like 30% was a really bad choice. I think it should have been 25, so the numbers are round and easier to figure out. Because we get so many weird numbers, stats ending in 30, or 10, or 5. There's also random extra rules, like not being able to attack ocean monsters underwater. Yeah, that makes me wonder, can you summon ocean monsters without water on dry land? That's something to think about. It fits more of a video game or a tabletop RPG than a card game. Also, speaking of field power bonuses, if they were introduced, how would they be introduced? Would the game come with a list of fields and boards to play? Or would they make you analyze the area you're playing? Like if you live in a more rural area near woods, would you get a forest bonus? Or would the game come with field mats? And it's also inconsistent whether the whole field is affected, or you have to play your monsters in a certain area of said field to get the boost. Like, if I play an insect monster, is just playing it enough to get the field power bonus, or do I have to play it in a forest space? Now, the anime rules, I genuinely have no problem with them. Like I say, anime is a visual medium. It's more so when the crazy rules are inconsistent. For example, you have equip spells not working on monsters with a field power bonus. But that's not true, as in later duels that doesn't exist. Now that I think about it, the special rules might just be a Duelist Kingdom only thing. Because we see people dueling before this tournament and after the tournament, they don't have these crazy rules. In fact, everything before Duelist Kingdom starts, the game seems pretty accurate. Aside from the 2000 life point thing. So the rule change isn't because of Battle City, it might just be a Duelist Kingdom only thing. Maybe they're the special rules Weevil mentioned. And while the Duelist Kingdom rules are memed on, I will always defend them from an anime perspective. The duels are genuinely really exciting. Let's compare it to wrestling. For example, when you see Jeff Hardy dive off a ladder, would you ever see this in a real Olympic wrestling match? No, you wouldn't. But it's darn entertaining. And it's much more interesting than, well, actually watching amateur wrestling. Plus, I actually really like the spectacle. In the anime, everyone plays a totally different deck, but in real life, people play pretty much the same thing. And aside from public domain stuff like Pot of Greed, everyone plays a completely unique deck that fits their character, often using cards that would never survive in the real game. I mean, when people complain about Duelist Kingdom rules, I just want to remind them, this is an anime and sometimes things need dramatic flair. And it's a visual medium. You can't just have the same duels, you need variety. I'm not a rules lawyer, and I'm not going to complain about these fake rules. I just want to see monsters fighting, and the fake rules makes the series more wide. It's powerful because it's an anime and not beholden to following the rules. But also, can you imagine how boring these duels would be if they had the basic rules in this arc? Before any of the refinements of the later seasons, where it's just battles with no tributes, with no summoning or strategy at all. The creative rules added visual flair till they could actually invent the real rules of the game. Plus, to a non-player, the duels are relatable. I mean, everyone knows how difficult some Yu-Gi-Oh cards can be to understand. And not just today with things like Synchros and XZs. No, even back in the day, you had stuff like Mystical Ref Panel that nobody knew how to use. But I think 90% of people can follow Fish Out of Water are defenseless, or Zombies can revive, or Water conducts electricity. One other note about this duel, Yugi actually bet his life to Weevil if he lost. Now Weevil may be a total jerk, but really he's a 15-year-old boy who's arrogant because he's successful. And honestly, that would inflate anyone's head. But I doubt he's some kind of psycho who wants Yugi to pass away. While the rules are nothing like the real game, it's not completely random, it follows more of an RPG video game logic, where if it could work in a real fight, it applies here. For example, in this duel, you have a monster that can't fly or has no ranged attacks, probably could never beat a flying monster. Have you ever tried to use the sword in Super Ghouls and Ghosts? I also feel like there's more stats that exist in the game. Summon Skull, for instance, is just a fiend with 2500 attack. But in the anime, he can fly and he has electricity. Can they fly? Can they do attacks with lightning, magic, or just physical attacks? Types also play off each other. What realistically would happen, happens. You have Great Moth. Cocoon of Evolution gets destroyed, but he survives. Why? Because a moth probably could survive if you destroy the cocoon early. In the real game, obviously you go to the graveyard, no fanfare. But also, if you notice, nobody ever actually calls out cheating, except blatant cheaters like Bandit Keith who actively hide cards on their wristbands. Seriously, when shenanigans happen, how come nobody ever says, that's cheating or that's unfair? It's always more, why didn't I think of that? Or I didn't think that could happen. Weevil doesn't really have much of a defined strategy besides equipping insects with laser cannons. Why is that the insect boost? Why not bigger stingers or something? Though I guess seeing a giant praying mantis covered in lasers is kinda cool. His ace monster is Great Moth, which requires 6 turns to summon after being housed in a cocoon. Yugi keeps attacking the cocoon despite being weaker, as if monsters have health. Spoiler warning, they don't. I'm not the biggest fan of the design of Weevil's bugs, honestly. They're basically giant insects and not very dynamic. They all get taken out by Mirror Force, an iconic moment in the show and one of my personal favorites. Yugi being the trap master as always, even if this card gave us all trust issues. And Weevil is also a favorite character of mine. A lot of people hate him, but I don't. I think his smarminess is entertaining. Plus, he wears glasses.
See, he wears glasses like I do. And it's nice to have someone represent them who isn't a nerd or an awkward weirdo. I'm happy to have Weevil Underwood in my camp.
Yeah, Weevil is not a popular character whatsoever, but guess what? I like him. I like his insect monsters, and I play them most often. And then Weevil doesn't actually use that many spell or trap cards. He uses this one worm-looking thing, but that's it. His main monster is Great Moth, a powerful card but way too slow to bring out. It is completely unviable in the real game. Even back in the day, Great Moth also has this poison effect. Yeah, Weevil doesn't really use many complex strategies, for being such a acclaimed strategist in the lore. God, I love Mirror Force. I think Weevil's biggest flaw is his arrogance, because while he is generally good at being sneaky, once he gets a strong monster out, he's as dumb as everyone else. And he just gets aggressive. But there's two problems with this Mirror Force battle. One, the math is all wrong. If he took half the damage from each monster's attack value, he would have lost here. Second, since when does Mirror Force have a damage effect? It just destroys monsters. This doesn't even occur later on in other later uses of Mirror Force. Yugi defeats Weevil by using Burning Land to take out the forest advantage. If Yugi didn't know about the field power bonus rule, why would he have Burning Land? What does it do outside of that? Then uses Maki the Magical Mist to make a storm happen, which makes Weevil's bugs more conductive to electricity. But keep in mind, Maki the Magical Mist pretty much acts like what would happen if a rainstorm actually happened on the field. How would it affect this type of monster? Weevil loses both of his star chips and Joey takes his glove for himself. Joey looks for his duel and is challenged by My Valentine, a fake psychic who uses the smell of her cards to predict her next move and psych out her opponent. Miss Cleo should sue for copyright infringement.
So people always talk about My Valentine's perfume trick, how she has to memorize 40 different scents. Well, that's not really true, because if you notice, My Valentine is a character who actually plays a lot of duplicates in her deck. She plays 9 Harpy Ladies, and 3 copies of her 2 equip spells. So theoretically, if you divide 40 by 3, you get 17 point something. So really, she'd only have to memorize like 17 different scents, rather than 40. Which, I mean, 17 is a lot of sense to remember, but still. As for how it could work, well, like that, basically. That's more than likely how she would do it.
One of the strangest cuts is the theme of what can be seen but remains unseen. The answer to this changes a few times, but most often it's friendship. But it's also used to mean other things, as philosophy is actually kind of a common talking point in the dialogue of the subversion. Joey starts off the duel by asking Mai why she duels. She does it for materialistic reasons, and that's always portrayed as bad. But really, I feel like that's a bit judgmental because let's face it, lots of people do things for money or for fun, and they're not bad for it. Not everyone competes for tragic backstory reasons. My Valentine plays Harpy Ladies, a very popular swarming archetype and one of the first archetypes in the game. Mai is one of the few people this early on to use an archetype at all. Most duelists just run a type of monster, like dinosaurs or insects. Also, their designs are something else. Yugioh was making us crush on monster girls before it was cool. This deck here is all about swarming, and it's a little anticlimactic considering how good her deck would be later. As of right now, it's all about swarming and powering up Harpy Ladies, but later Mai would include counter cards, as her deck was never actually about boss monsters, but rather swarming and combo breaking. Yeah, crazy, huh? A duelist with actual strategy. Still, her Harpies also have this weird bondage theme going on. I mean, their equip is Dominatrix armor and, I'm not making this up, a whip. And much later, they start wearing a choke chain. Joey wins with Time Wizard after figuring out her strategy. She had been spraying her cards with perfume and using the scent to card predict. This actually makes a lot more sense in the manga. Because remember, duels took place in small arenas, so he'd actually be a lot closer to Mai, as they'd be sitting a table apart, not across a huge arena. So it actually makes sense he'd be smelling it. Duelist Kingdom's story is a direct adaptation of the manga's plot, but they get rid of these smaller boxes with the action figure size holograms for the giant arenas we see in the anime. But the story itself in the anime is a direct adaptation of the manga story. So you get awkward moments like this. But yeah, Mai's deck is also really bad in this duel. It's all Harpies. Later on, her real strategy comes up, which is all about counter traps and handicapping the opponent. But yeah, that makes this duel kind of suck in a way. Maya's deck is a watered down version of what she plays, and then Joey does nothing but get his butt kicked till Time Wizard and Baby Dragon save the day. Two characters here who both often have really good duels, not playing at their best unfortunately. Yugi's next opponent is Mako, a character who's actually kind of tragic. He lost his father during a typhoon, and now he honors his legacy by going on his own high seas journey, and he wants to buy a boat. So for all four of the rivals, he seems to have the most development, along with Mai. We know nothing about Weevil or Rex's personal life or backstory. They're just jerks, and that's it. It was always weird to me when minor characters get a tragic backstory when they're just fodder, especially fodder for the hero to beat and not the villain. It'd make more sense if he was fodder for Marek or something to make us hate him. Let's go back to the original Dragon Ball. Mako's like Nam in a way, that they stand out from the other tournament participants. Like in the first World Martial Arts Tournament in Dragon Ball, the opponents are a comedic role of a fat man who never bathes, an exotic dancer, an a-hole dragon who's the first round opponent to be beaten ASAP, and finally, Nam, a poor monk who's in the tournament to use the prize money to pay for food for his village. Like, one of these is not like the other. Same with the opponents here in this series in Battle City. And he has an actual motivation for the tournament besides money and winning. And both of them face the hero, which makes you kinda not want to root for the hero. But since they're so minor, they also don't really get closure for their stories. The hero feels like a little bit of a jerk for beating them. I feel more like they should have faced villains rather than the hero. Mako plays various sea monsters underwater, the kind of thing you'd see in a Ray Harryhausen movie, like a kraken, and a shark that's totally not ripping off Jaws in its artwork, a giant jellyfish, where's SpongeBob when you need him, and Karyushin, which is technically his ace, I assume. It's major enough to be in the episode title of the Japanese version. Yet Mako doesn't really have much of a strategy outside of playing monsters underwater. You know the story, attack the moon, he says, destroying an equip spell. I think of all the Duelist Kingdom rules, this is definitely the weirdest, since Mako was still attacking when Yugi did this, and the burning land effect somehow allows 3 attacks. At least that remains standard in other duels, but here they erase the one consistent rule of 1 attack per turn. Yeah, definitely the most egregious of the rules. Actually, the whole duel is just wacky rules. None of it works, even in Duelist Kingdom's weird and wacky logic. I love Mako as a character, but this is not good. Also at this time, we learn Pegasus' main plan. He wants to collude with the Kaiba board of directors and overthrow the company so he can take over. The board are all blinded by greed and want to get rid of Kaiba as he lost to Yugi. While Pegasus has his own motivation, we'll learn about much later. Part of this plan involves Mokuba, particularly a card chip he has access to that includes all kinds of information about Kaiba Corp that Pegasus wants to get his hands on. A detail that was actually cut. So Mokuba gets kidnapped, not the only time this is going to happen by the way. He's taken to the castle, but he escapes, and in a misguided attempt to help his brother, duels Yugi and rage quits worse than a Call of Duty lobby, and then steals Yugi's star chips. I guess rubber banding Yugi to keep him from getting too far ahead. Yeah, worst duel in the series by far, as Mokuba does nothing but play 2 monsters and then lose them before quitting. It is also at this point that Tristan's voice changes out of nowhere. Sam Riegel ended up replaced with Greg Abbey, which was definitely for the better. Not just because Greg's voice was more iconic as Tristan, but also because Sam's portrayal was actually really annoying. If I'm honest, Sam Riegel is a great voice actor. I like him in other roles, but this was just bad. It's a noticeable, but very welcome change. The old voice was more of a slow, low-pitched, dumb guy voice. Greg's is much more of a normal guy's voice, fitting Tristan's houseplant of a personality. Greg would end up becoming the permanent voice for all future iterations of the character. And Sam Riegel would remain until Season 4 in other roles, such as voicing Rex Raptor. At the same time, Kaiba has been hunted by Pegasus' inept security force with their deadly finger pointing, and Kaiba escapes every time, then sneaks into his own lab, Solid Snake style. And then it's revealed that Kaiba has somehow passed away. Of course, we know better, even though Kaiba is somehow now dueling Yugi. I mean, this guy uses a Blue Eyes White Dragon, so it has to be Kaiba, right? There's only 3 of those cards in existence. Well, it would have been an effective twist if we didn't see the guards steal Kaiba's deck when he jumped out the window earlier. Though given the bad skin and evil glow in his eyes, it's obviously some kind of fake. It's an imposter. And thanks to Kaiba playing Chloe O'Brien, he helps Yugi defeat the fake with elite hacking skills. Who is the fake, though? Well, in the dub, it's explained he's the dark side of Kaiba's mind that Yugi banished. I find that to be a pretty good explanation. In the Japanese version, there is no explanation. He's apparently some shapeshifter, as he briefly turns into Pegasus. That's disturbing. He looks like some clown Majin Buu hybrid. Gross. Also, why was that part cut? Too scary for 4-kids? Ghost Kaiba uses Kaiba's deck, and we get to preview more of his strategy. We just see how prepared Kaiba is, as he has lots of trap cards, even stopping Mirror Force at one point. Unironically, this imposter gets closer to beating Yugi than the real Kaiba ever will. We also see the iconic debut of Magical Hats, a cool card that can hide a monster, or 2, or even 3 inside, along with traps. Or nothing. If only this could have been implemented in the real game. In the game, you have to use magic or trap cards. And you can only use 3, not 4. So no empty hats to use as bait. As the day ends, Mai is seen defeating various NPC duelists to level up her experience. Hey, it could be worse. You could be stuck fighting boars in the woods forever. But yeah, after her loss, the thrill of dueling is gone. She wants to beat Joey. Is this how tsunderes show love? I mean, it's clear she loves me, but... Anyway, Rex Raptor, still vengeful about being cheated out of his room, wants to duel Mai again, and shows off his minuscule chip collection. She pulls a "that's cute" and shows how far she is ahead. I consider this a turning point in the series, as most of the duels at this point have been about teaching various quirks of the game: attack and defense, win condition, effects, field power bonuses, equips. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. It is gradual. We get drip-fed the information, very slowly so we can process it, with full duels dedicated to showing us these mechanics. But there's also pacing issues, and the early parts can really drag on. Though it might also be my fault since I've seen this show 20 times.
That's no exaggeration, I really have.
From this point forward, the duels are all 100% competition. The kid gloves are off, so to speak. Mai manipulates Rex into facing Joey in her place, which makes Joey jealous. And with a little bit of luck, Joey holds his own, along with Power of Friendship, using a card him and Tristan used together. Joey wants to prove himself on his own, so he agrees to Mai's stipulation of no advice from Yugi. So that's a cool moment for sure. Rex's deck is all dinosaur monsters. And dragons? Weird. The funny thing though, is that dinosaurs are notoriously underused in the show, and very rarely actually get any support. So it's interesting they made a whole duelist to represent this one type that doesn't really get much attention. Rex's strategy is the oh-so-brilliant strategy of summon a monster in battle. He plays no magic cards and no traps to speak of. Literally, his one magic card is an equip spell. He plays Red Eyes Black Dragon, which everyone knows is Joey's card, so you know where this is going. Rex is going to be foolish and bet it. As is the theme of Joey's, winning your opponent's best cards. Also, a trope is debunked here. Everyone always says, Joey only ever wins with Baby Dragon and Time Wizard. Nope, he does once. Baby Dragon here is defeated in 30 seconds. Time Wizard pulls out the victory alone. I think this is a pretty good duel, by the way. The Swamp and Lava Battle Guards being an allegory for Joey and Tristan was nice, and Rex pulled off some good moves. Plus some funny moments like Joey accidentally beating Rex's best dinosaur with a fire monster. Flame Swordsman, which is technically his best monster despite being mediocre. And it's only his ace because he has an equip for it. And that equip, that's pretty much the only reason. And that equip only works with Flame Swordsman. Absolutely nothing else. I think that's the only time these Duelist Kingdom rules have actually benefited Joey. And Flame Swordsman's equip is called Salamandra. It sounds like salamander. He's really just a no-effect, high-level attack monster. Ironically, it's a fusion in real life. The materials specifically are Misaki the Legendary Swordsman and Flame Manipulator. So a generic samurai and a firebender. Misaki shows up a couple times, but is very often just fodder. Once for the Harpies, and another for Bones' zombies later on. And Flame Manipulator never actually shows up. And it's a good fit for Joey because he uses strong but bland monsters. Also, just a random note in the dub, he's called Rex Raptor, but never just Rex. It's always Rex Raptor, so it might not even be a surname but a double first name. To interject, remember how I said the anime is verbatim with the manga's story? This is an example of that. As you can see, Time Wizard is drawn as a monster, not a magic card. In the manga, it's always been a spell card. So that's another instance of the anime adaptation being unique. Rex loses when Time Wizard goes off, fossilizing his red eyes, and it's all his own fault too. There was no anti-rule, Rex just got greedy and wanted Time Wizard, so he made the deal when he was ahead. Another trend for the series, Joey having to win monsters that would be his ace. Unlike Kaiba and Yugi who just get their cards, Joey slowly builds up a strong deck himself. Since its reputation is the Dragon of Potential, which Joey represents. He has all the skills in the world to be a great duelist. He's just lacking the resource, as Joey's character is in poverty. Yugi, however, has a grandpa who runs a card shop, so he gets first dibs, and Kaiba is basically a trillionaire in this show, so he can get whatever cards he wants. Another tangent, let's talk about in-universe card rarity. Notice how big a deal everyone makes about Red Eye's Black Dragon? How it's super rare and all that? Well, Summon Skull is stronger, so I think that's a point in the series canon, that rarity means more than just strength. So Rex is cast away, but Mai stays and decides to befriend the group in a heartwarming moment. She shares her food with them and her plans to get into the castle. To the guys, she's still dominant and take charge. But for Taya, she's actually a bit softer, being more like a big sister trying to bond with her and letting her use her makeshift shower, even keeping her safe from the wandering eyes of Tristan and Joey. Oh yeah, they were characterized as complete perverts in the original, especially the early parts of the manga, and that was watered down significantly, so this is pretty much the last remnant of that trait. I love what a normal interaction this is. Duelist Kingdom, I feel, has a really good story because there's a lot of scenes away from the game that help flesh out the characters. And that kind of stopped happening once Battle City really was going. We focused almost entirely on the duels and less on the characters. So yeah, I think this is part of why Duelist Kingdom is so beloved. We also learn a bit more about Mai's backstory, and that she used to be a casino croupier. We'll learn more about this story later, but it's implied this is what gave Mai her loner nature. She has a very cynical view on people, especially men.
In my experience, their type is only good for moving furniture or fixing cars.
Since it's pretty obvious how horrible it can be if you're a woman having to work around a bunch of drunks. Maybe that's why she's only friendly to Taya at first. Though she does mock her too. I think she respects Joey for beating her, while Taya is more someone to actually befriend. But since Mai has the personality of a cat, if you show her too much affection, she leaves. We also see her getting taken away by a mysterious shadow man. But before that's resolved, Bakura materializes out of nowhere. He's a friend from school, and Taya's seen him pop up here and there, like a ghost. He must not be a close friend, because they never invite him to filler adventures. The group all discuss their favorite monsters. Yugi and Joey's are obvious, Dark Magician and Flame Swordsman. Taya's is Magician of Faith since she's the support role of the group, and that card is obviously more about support than battle. And Tristan has Cyber Commander, a vanilla monster that didn't even get printed for a while, and it fits since he's got the personality of oatmeal. But here we meet the next Millennium item holder, Yami Bakura, or Thief King Bakura. the main villain for the series. Not just this arc, but the series till the end. Very unique, as most anime, well shonen at least, tend to just do the one arc, one villain, where once the arc is over, that villain's gone and they bring in a new one. Bakura is a presence throughout the whole series, so that's really unique. He pulls them into a shadow duel, where the other characters cosplay as their own monsters, but thankfully this doesn't affect their abilities. The monsters are just independent. This whole episode is actually filler, but it doesn't feel like it. Technically, it's adapting a manga chapter, but the timeline has changed to be a part of Duelist Kingdom. It's actually a scene in what Season 0, the original Toei series, covered. You know, before the card game took over. Now, Season 0 is not required viewing because of stuff like this. All the important stuff from that series is usually just covered in flashbacks. At this point, the characters seem to learn about Atem, the pharaoh spirit inside Yugi. So, the question is, even though they were made by different companies, is Season 0 technically canon? Or the manga chapters before the card game, too. Although Duelist Kingdom starts where Season 0, the Toei series, left off, it's not really a sequel. It jumps straight ahead to the card game stuff. Even though most of the preliminary stuff is skipped, it still is part of the anime's canon. Sort of. Instead of starting the series with them, they're relegated to flashbacks, such as the scene where Yugi stands up for Joey and Tristan from a bully. Some other events from those early chapters are also sometimes rewritten to be part of the actual story. For example, Kaiba's introduction is actually a much longer full arc called the Death Tea. And then after that, it's more non-card game antics. Here, it's moved up to be the opening of the series itself. Yami Bakura's introduction serves the same purpose. It's written to be part of the Duelist Kingdom story, rather than the pre-card game era of Yugioh. The rest of Season 0 will either be introduced through flashbacks, or ignored by the canon. Not exactly retconned, they just aren't covered or referenced. And for the most part, it actually works really well. You wouldn't really notice. Obviously the card game was the big hit, so Studio Gallop chose to start with it, rather than the other games. Plus, at this point, the series had become actually a lot lighter and softer. You know, no more death penalty games or anything like that. Or if they did happen, they were exclusively used by villains. There are a couple times Yugi does mind crush people, but that's also just a holdover from the original series. So obviously, it does stick out when it happens. I'm just going to say it, I love Bakura's deck. This is the first face-down defense summon. Another common tactic in the anime, you see, if a defending monster is there just to defend, you'll be summoned face up. You can't do that in the real game, but like I said, it's a visual medium, and it's always nice to see the cards actually have to take a defensive stance. However, if it's face-down defense, that's always bad. It's usually a flip effect monster. So another first. Maneater Bug, Morphing Jar, those words mean enough to send any Yu-Gi-Oh player to run to their panic room. Bakura has it won, but good Bakura swaps with evil Bakura, and that ends the duel and sends evil Bakura away forever.
Yeah, right, if only it was that easy.
With that over, we found out who got mine. It's called a player killer, or panic in the dub. The player killers, who are mostly just a group of mercenaries ordered to make sure only 4 participants make the finals. So let me get this straight. Pegasus sends everyone 2 star chips, so 40 people, but instead of having 8 people advance, he artificially limits it to 4. Why not just send everyone 1 chip? Or invite less people? What kind of sense does that make? Have an 8-man final round. But yeah, you're forced to duel them, I assume. That makes sense, but are you forced to wager all your star chips too? Because Ghost Kaiba didn't use star chips at all. Then, Yugi and Joey face the other player killers, the Paradox Brothers. And they don't have to bet all their chips against them either. And then why would Mai bet all her chips anyway? She has 9. Panic took all her chips and was also mean and sadistic about it. Uh-oh. He messed up with the wrong pharaoh. Now, his whole gimmick is mean big guy, scary darkness. But he's up against a town, who is an actual, well, big scary spirit with real evil powers. Panic is just a big giant guy with props. It's like if a pro wrestler tried to fight Satan. Yeah, that's not going to work. Panic's whole gimmick is hiding monsters in the dark, and he has monsters with some of the weirdest attack and defense stats in the series. All of their stats end in 30, 70, 10, which is really weird because all stats in Yu-Gi-Oh! Tend to end in a 50 or a 0. So, if you don't have a calculator, have fun adding that up. And most life point trackers online, yeah, they only do it in 50s, so you're screwed. If you really want to get kicked out of your Yu-Gi-Oh! Club, play these cards. Okay, but seriously, now the reason their stats are so weird is because they're lowered because they get a field power bonus and they're given more normal stats. In the manga, the knight is not a field. In the anime, it is. I think in the manga it works better, since in the manga, the knight is caused by Castle of Dark Illusion's effect. In the anime, it's another field caused by them playing at night. But Yugi plays fiends too, just like Panic, and they don't get boosted by the knight. Also, since it's night, apparently field power bonuses don't work anymore, aside from the knight. Panic's deck is pretty much just playing defense forever. While his monsters are cool and very horrific looking, get it? Horrific? Like peak fiend design here, I'm not gonna lie, they're really cool looking. There's nothing exciting about his deck. He just hides monsters in the dark. And he very rarely even fights. I love this duel because of how sharp-tongued Yugi is. He holds no punches on how big a loser he thinks Panic is. And he's in total control throughout the whole thing. So Panic cheats with flamethrowers. Where are the judges? You know, funnily enough, I wonder if there's actually a rule in the rulebook, like in real Yu-Gi-Oh!, banning flamethrowers from being used in tournaments. Who knows, maybe there's a loophole. Also, I just want to say this. His castle monster, why is it a monster? It should just be a field spell or something. How does a floating castle hurt you? Even the video games of Yu-Gi-Oh! Don't really know what to do with it. He somehow metamorphosizes rocks to levitate around him and then throws them at you. Yugi wins by destroying the flotation ring of the castle, which sounds like nonsense. However, it's not. Theoretically, that caused the game to be over with Catapult Turtle's effect. The flotation ring stuff, for visual flair. It is pretty anticlimactic to end a duel with monsters still on the field, so this is a creative way to get rid of them. So anyway, this guy gets mind crushed, and Mai gets her chips back, but she refuses them because of pride. Until Joey teases her and tries to take them. Then she wants them back.
I wonder if this will be relevant later in the story.
Kaiba and Yugi then reunite. Kaiba introduces his prototype duel disc, which is actually significant as in the manga, remember, the holograms are about the size of action figures. With this, they're lifelike. Joey being Joey challenges him to a duel after feeling slighted, and for virtually no reason, other than he's a knucklehead. Then Joey seems to forget how to play as he just attacks Kaiba with weak monsters. Like, come on, he knows how to play. This is so stupid. All it does is show Kaiba's Rabid Horseman, which is a fairly powerful fusion, and Joey looks like a total loser here. Well, that was such a squandered opportunity. Kaiba then gives a backstory on Pegasus, mostly just stuff we already knew though. You can read people's minds and see their cards. And it's also our introduction to Bandit Keith, an American dueling champion who's a prominent cheater, and also collects trophies and likes to humiliate opponents. Basically every sore winner you hated playing with in school. Pegasus humiliated him and had a literal child with baby teeth beat him with his prediction. Man, dueling really is taken seriously. Also, Keith is such a jerk for not letting a kid win anyway. No wonder the audience hates him. The anime makes it look like as if Pegasus just wanted to make Keith The anime makes it look like as if Pegasus just wanted to make Keith suffer for no reason. In the manga, this is not a tournament, but a publicity stunt back when monster dueling wasn't all that mainstream. In the United States, at least. Bandit Keith was famous for winning everything in every game he ever got interested in. His nickname Bandit meaning he got a hold of all trophies. And was now interested in being a duelist. Pegasus made a demonstration event and took advantage of Keith's fame, challenging him to attract public attention and media coverage. The kids were attendees who had never heard of the game, and Pegasus personally handed them decks and taught them the basics of the cards. What Pegasus intended by having the kid defeat Keith was to prove that in this game, anyone can be a winner, even against a legend. Pegasus succeeded in making duels big in America, and Keith being humiliated was just collateral damage. While it's technically cheating, who's going to hold Pegasus accountable anyway? With that, Mai disappears with an IOU, and a new day of dueling begins. Joey is challenged in a graveyard field by Bones, a ghostly looking boy with his own henchman, dumb brute deep voice guy, an Australian guy with red hair. So basically Raccoon and a palette swap Jace. And shocker, they're being led by the guy we just heard about, Bandit Keith. So that's cool. That flashback actually had quite a bit of relevance, actually, because Keith generally will play a good part in the future of this arc. So about Bones, I actually feel a little bit bad for him, because even his friends mock him, but he probably can't help looking ghoulish. Like maybe he has an iron deficiency or something. As if you couldn't tell by his appearance, Bones plays zombie monsters. Many of his cards are either revived versions of regular monsters, like dragons or warriors, or ghostly horror-based in appearance, like Medusa or a jack-o'-lantern. His strategy is to use Call of the Haunted to turn monsters into zombies, that revive every time they're destroyed and get stronger. Now, footnote. The dub and trading card game differ from the subversion and the original card game on this. You see, in the original game, zombie is not a type. There's a ghost type. The zombie part is just the special class that comes with Call of the Haunted that turns a monster into a zombie. Think of it like the difference between a type and an archetype. The only difference is the zombie archetype does not exist. Like, imagine if there was a card that turned winged beasts into harpies, for example. In the trading card game, they're zombies, and in the dub, they did nothing to distinguish zombie types from the zombie class as Call of the Haunted made them. Speaking of which, what on earth was Bones' strategy if Keith didn't give him Call of the Haunted? Because remember, he's the one that added it to his deck. What on earth would Bones' strategy have been if Keith didn't intervene? You know, he's the one that added the non-zombie monsters to revive and Call of the Haunted to Bones' deck. So without it, he'd just be a generic zombie duelist. The only real advantage he'd have would be the field power bonus. Unfortunately, the real version of Call of the Haunted is absolutely terrible. It's nothing more glamorous than a trap version of Monster Reborn. What's the point of that? Joey pulls off his best Chris Redfield impression.
No! Don't go! No! Don't go!
But I doubt anyone's going to drop a rocket launcher. Also, Pegasus had the foresight to troll them with these traps. Seriously, a boulder-shaped balloon. And speaking of Chris Redfield, someone decided to punch a boulder too. And Pegasus, really going back to his cartoon enthusiast roots. And funnily enough, Time Wizard fails. This is the only time we see its negative effect. Joey still wins anyway though, by using the shield and sword card. But Keith's goons trap them in the cave, and then Keith steals their star chips, becoming the first to qualify for the finals. Fun fact, this is the last duel with any field power bonuses, as the Labyrinth field in the next duel doesn't grant a bonus, and then the concept itself being dropped once the finals start. This duel also brings up a plot hole with Duelist Kingdom. Well, less of a plot hole and more of a rule that can just be manipulated. You see, one rule in Duelist Kingdom is there's no such thing as a direct attack. That's fine on the surface, but what's preventing someone from just playing in defense mode forever? Nobody ever seems to think of that or how to stop it. Except here, Bones plays Stop Defense, and down the road we see My Valentine use Shadow of Eyes. Not in this arc, in another one. And then Ghost Kabe uses a card to stop defense, but that's it. Nobody ever seems to play around this rule. Yugi and Joey, however, are stuck in the cave, and they find a perfectly architectured ring hidden inside. You know, Pegasus has like jigsaw levels of foresight. He planned everything ahead. Inside is the Paradox Brothers, two twins cursed to speak in rhyme forever. I love these guys, they're super entertaining, and while villains, they're not total jerks, often goofing around with martial arts and clever little rhymes. Their stage is also the most unique, as it's a maze, with totally unique rules, something I wish would have been implemented in the real game somehow. And the reward? Joey and Yugi will receive their final star chips to qualify for the finals. So everyone knows this duel. So yeah, this is the duel where they create a maze, and you have to get to the end of the maze. Aside from the maze, they also have Gate Guardian, which is the final boss waiting at the end of the maze, and at the time, the second most powerful card in the game, behind only the Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, which is pretty big for a henchman. Who only appear once, not counting Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. The other monsters are ones that manipulate the maze, like Dungeon Worm and Jirai Gumo and Wall Shadow. I absolutely love this duel. It's actually the first 3-episode duel in the series, and up to this point, it's the longest duel in the series as well. The maze field, specifically, is so fun and adds a lot of strategy to these matches. There's also a bonus part to this duel where the Paradox Brothers pull a riddle. The classic Village of Liars versus Truth Tellers riddle. However, this is all BS, and Yugi picks up on it right away, and he ends up being right, even outsmarting them at one point to win the riddle. These guys are such fun villains, I like them a lot. But yeah, the maze field is definitely one of the most unique fields there is. But it was never implemented properly in any Yu-Gi-Oh! Medium. In the real game, it's nothing but a high defense monster. Duelist of the Roses sort of used it, but it never really went too far with it, just using the maze as a wall in some stages. The Labyrinth Zone in the anime is just a maze. There are two ways to win a maze duel. One, the normal way. There's no direct battles like a normal duel. You only duel when you and your monster occupy the same space. Remember the story mode from Dragon Ball Z Budokai 2? It's a lot like that. Para and Dox themselves use maze manipulation cards, basically ways to cheat the maze system. Like monsters, they can move an infinite amount of maze spaces, either by going underground or through the walls, technically not moving any spaces whatsoever. They also have Gate Guardian, one of the highest attack monsters in the game, and in real life is genuinely impossible to summon. Like, I think it's #1 hardest card to summon. And that's too bad. I like the idea of combining monsters like this. It's sort of a precursor to the XZ's monsters we see in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Especially with how the Paradox Brothers use them. How it's technically 3 monsters, and you can dislodge pieces to make them separate. I think the MVP of this duel has to be Black Skull Dragon, because its design is totally sick. And it's a good thing fusion cards either don't exist, or just materialize with the holograms, because obviously, nobody knew that 1, a tag duel would occur that Yuki and Joey would have to combine resources in, and 2, that Joey would win the Red Eyes Black Dragon. The maze cards also could have been a fun way to implement into the game somehow. Duelist of the Roses tries, kind of. But the maze isn't a maze in that game, it's just a barrier space. Labyrinth Wall in the real game is just a super high defense monster. Magical Labyrinth, on the other hand, instead of changing the maze's shape, just summons Wall Shadow, which is just Shadow Ghoul with 3000 defense, which is also a warrior, despite the materials being a zombie and a rock type. Not really reflective of the creature's real ability in the game. Now, how do you do a monster like Wall Shadow in the real game, where it just pops out of a maze that doesn't exist? Well, there's another card called Total Defense Shogun that can attack while in defense mode. I think a similar effect for Wall Shadow would have very accurately reflected his in-anime ability. But even after they win, victory is all but guaranteed, as Kaiba has been baited into dueling Yugi himself to save his brother after Pegasus took Mokuba's soul too. Pegasus, ever the manipulator, has conned them into being enemies rather than working together. Just like in a romance anime, they can't explain to each other and just end up fighting. No teamwork, all misunderstandings. It's an intense duel from beginning to end, as both have stakes. However, the situation is exacerbated by Yugi's ignorance to the situation and Kaiba's pride to not ask for help. Remember, Kaiba's philosophy is all about making an effort and getting out what you put in for yourself. So asking for help is not really something he wants to do. Yugi has it won, but then Kaiba threatens to go bungee jumping if he loses the duel, leading to a bitter fight between Yugi and the Pharaoh Spirit. The Spirit wants the win. Yugi doesn't. So Yugi forfeits, now terrified of how far the Pharaoh Spirit was willing to go. So now, he's lost it all. The chance to save his grandpa. I mean, theoretically he could duel more people, I guess. He still has like 5 star chips. But there's no more main characters left to fight. It's all NPCs. Oh wait, My Valentine shows up, with the same amount of star chips Yugi won for. Okay, seriously, this is a really heartwarming moment. That IOU actually meant something. Today, I'll pay you back tomorrow on a day that never comes. She honored her word. So really, this reminds me of an RPG game. You know how you're given the opportunity to do something nice and just merciful for someone randomly, and then it comes back for you later? They always show up later to help you or give you an item for your troubles. However, due to shock, Yugi cannot accept them. He's too upset and in his own head. Mai gets aggressive, leading to Taya challenging her. It's a clear mismatch, as Mai is a champion level duelist, and Taya is... Hey, wait a minute. Taya beat Joey in episode 2. Why is she suddenly depicted as being a loser? I mean, she's shown playing the darn game. I mean, her only opponent is pre-trained Joey before he ever knew how to play. But this isn't like a situation with Bulma, where the character can't fight whatsoever and has to hide. Taya's played the game before and has done really well at it. Theoretically, maybe it's just nerves and anxiety. Taya seems to forget how to even use her own cards. I mean, she built this deck herself. I mean, it could just be stage fright, or the stakes of the match. I mean, how many of y'all do something, but the second you're in front of a crowd, you don't even know how to start? This match is exemplified by the contrast of monsters. Mai's harpies are big, feral, and dominant, and Taya plays cute little fairies that look like pillows. Her only strategy seems to be equip cards and Wabaku. Oh, and Magician of Faith. Mai pretty much has the whole thing won. Luckily, Mai surrenders, giving Yugi the chips and continuing Taya's dominant winning streak. Look it up. Taya is 100% undefeated in Yugioh. Now the question is My Valentine always planning to surrender, or did Taya's emotions and attachment to her friends win her over? It's hard to know, because Mai is actually a very complex character. And with that, we are concluded with Duelist Kingdom. The preliminaries, at least. Some plot threads still remain, like why does Pegasus want to do all this? Can Grandpa be rescued? Well, that's all next time, as we have all our finalists confirmed and we'll never see a star chip again for the rest of the show. Tune in next time when we see Yugi, Joey, My Valentine, and Bandit Keith face off in a Final Four clash to see who gets the big reward. Can Yugi save his grandpa? Will Joey Wheeler get the money? And also, Kaiba gets a shot at Pegasus to save his brother. And we finally learn the why behind Pegasus's goal. Is there a deeper motive, or was it just for the lulz? Tune in next time for part 2 of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Complete Series Retrospective, the Duelist Kingdom Finals. Conclusion. So, that was Duelist Kingdom, and for the first arc of a shonen anime, it was really good. This arc leaves no mystery. It's no wonder this show became such a big hit. I like the interconnected story most. even minor duels like Bones vs. Joey affect the plot, as it gets them trapped in the cave that leads to the Paradox Brothers. We had lots of fun duels so far, some great introductions to the characters, some wacky RPG level crazy rules, set up everything we needed to know about the rest of the series, the lore was interesting, several characters had great growth, Pegasus is fun, the characters are all interesting, and aside from weird duel moments, the duels themselves are epic if you look at them from an anime-style battle perspective, rather than a strict gameplay perspective. Not much to say, it's a solid arc, with a good story, and a decent cast of side characters, and the duels themselves for the most part were absolutely fantastic. Granted, they were more about spectacle than strategy, but that doesn't detract from the duels themselves. I always like the variety in the monster designs, how everyone's deck is so different. Everyone, even minor characters, play at least 10 different cards, with very little being shared. And that's a strong point, everyone plays a super unique deck. As for the duels, you had some great ones like Yugi and Joey vs. the Paradox Brothers, Kaiba and Yugi on top of the castle. Even the most mid-tier opponent duels were fairly strong. Bones, Weevil, Rex all had great showings. The only truly bad duels I can think of is Yugi vs. Mokuba due to how short it is and uninteresting the cards are, then the Kaiba-Joey duel where he just kept throwing monsters into Kaiba. Mai and Joey was also pretty below average, since Joey didn't really put up much of a fight and just took the win in one turn, and Mai didn't really play any very exciting back row removal cards. I give Duelist Kingdom a 9 out of 10.